Hello, all you beautiful beings. I decided to remake this video, not because I think what I said was wrong, because my opinion on Greg's nonsense has largely not changed, but honestly, the video wasn't as good as it could have been. I remember I mistimed some of the background music, and I kind of feel like I took the bearing route of interrupting the video too often and too unnecessarily. So I decided to remake it, and without further ado, let's do it. What happened to you, man? I remember when this intro used to preface something at least kind of insightful.
You may remember a couple months back, TJ had a bunch of us submit questions to him that he was going to edit together in a BuzzFeed-style video where white men asked questions to social justice warriors. And the
How could I forget? That video has given me so much joy.
response to this was insane. Dozens of people wrote blogs and made video responses to this. Now,
Yeah, that tends to happen. People generally take umbrage with having randos show up, give them a label, and tell them, this is what you believe.
the very nature of a BuzzFeed-style questions video is already dishonest to begin with. Although
Well, gee, almost like those BuzzFeed videos aren't 100% literally serious. Although they do bring up some good points about privilege, or hell, even that the governor of Michigan should be held accountable for letting the people of Flint suffer. Something your pal TJ thinks is a joke. But anyway, those videos are at least real questions posed to real people. SJWs are this decade's version of hipsters and posers. In other words, a thought-terminating cliche used to try to shut people up when they say things you don't like.
some of us tried our best to make honest questions, the quippy nature and the shorthanded style of the questions doesn't really lead to honest discussion.
Really? I could have sworn that gems like, do you want women to be equal, or do you want women to be a protected class? And in your version of equality, will white men ever have a voice in society? We're totally going to promote calm, reasonable adult conversations.
That being said, though, I did find a handful of videos that tried to honestly answer these questions.
Even though I'm just a little old YouTube nobody who as of now has fewer than 900 subscribers, I did a video response and wrote a blog post in response to your guys' inane video. I realize now I could have saved a lot of time by just responding to the video with a compilation of myself imitating various barnyard noises, and of my dogs barking at the mail carrier, garbage collectors, and pretty much anyone else who walks near our house. No, because my dogs are adorable. But hey, I could always use the extra writing time, experience, and so forth.
One of these videos was not the one made by Christy Winters. She and a bunch of other people that I guess identify as social justice warriors collabed and answered these questions.
Firstly, Christy and the others in that video don't identify as social justice warriors. Your friends and other reactionaries give them that label on a regular basis. Secondly, didn't you just kind of admit that the questions in that video were kind of dishonest to begin with? So how is anyone supposed to answer them?
But they made a few mistakes, and a lot of video responses and blog responses made the same mistakes. Although yes, there were good answers and honest answers sprinkled into the Christy Winters video. Two of the mistakes that come up often made the video quite frustrating to watch.
Oh yeah, because the original video, and that other one you made wherein you chortle about your tendency to, quote, trigger fat black women, were totally the video equivalents of Idris Elba and Gabrielle Union giving me a hot oil massage. Don't judge me.
The first mistake is that Christy and a couple of the other YouTubers, instead of answering the question, they correct the questioner on their language that they're using, and then they just move on.
Armoured Skeptic, I don't know if you realize this, I don't think you do, but the word protected class actually has a specific meaning in law. Therefore, your claim that a protected class is a contradiction to equality just shows that you don't actually understand the terms that you're using.
Ah, snap.
Oh. Thanks. We can probably attribute this error on their end to the nature of the video that TJ put together, where our questions had to be fast-paced and quippy, and still try to convey complex concepts with absolutely no context.
Well, that doesn't sound the least bit like the reaction of a smarmy little prick who goofed off in class, gave his teacher a bullshit answer thinking he was being cute, and then was calmly but firmly corrected by said teacher. Nope, not the least bit. I gotta say though, it does make me you want to reconsider the line of work I plan to go into.
The second error that comes up a lot was more frustrating. The people answering the questions, again in lots of blogs and videos, acted as if the questions were accusatory and were directed at them personally.
Gee, I couldn't imagine why, except I refer you back to my point about how Christie, etc., they get assigned the SJW label by your friends, other reactionaries, and their fans, like all the time. So yes, when yet another anti-SJW video comes out, such people will assume that they're being addressed. There's an old clip of the Skeptic Feminists. It's because they were a part of the response collab Christie did. I'm editing that out of respect.
Again, this is an error on our end because the nature of the BuzzFeed video is to ask the question as if everyone that you're addressing the question to does this thing. Now, in my mind, when I was asking my questions, I was thinking, hey, have you ever thought of this? Is this something that you've noticed within your own behavior? Is this a behavioral aspect that you've noticed within your community? Is this something you've ever thought of before? So long.
Again, you. If you didn't mean for your questions to be taken personally, as you claim you did, who is this you're addressing?
Story short, a group of people that identify as social justice warriors collaborated again to ask questions to the anti-SJW, anti-feminist community. Now,
Gregory, I'm going to tell you this one last time. No one seriously identifies as an SJW. SJWs don't actually exist. Also, your claim of an anti-SJW, anti-feminist community also contradicts a few of the things you're going to say later, but we'll get there when we get there.
I don't personally identify as an anti-feminist or an anti-SJW, but I don't think that that matters to Christy Winters and her crew of content creators, mainly because I've heard many of them describe what I do as anti-feminism. I personally just consider myself a skeptic of any claim and all claims.
Greg, firstly, you've put out quite a bit of anti-feminist content, including a video response to Steve Shives, oh so intelligently titled, quote, "Feminism is my god now." So yes, people are going to take you as an anti-feminist. Secondly, you seem to love the label skeptic. You made it part of your channel name, for goodness sake. But something I think you misunderstand is that it's possible to be a skeptic but still be feminist or anti-feminist. I'm a skeptic and a feminist, so I, for example, would never see a headline on an online article, get mad, screenshot it, and throw a tantrum on Twitter or make a lengthy video without knowing the full story.
But I feel compelled to answer many of the questions in this video, mostly because they put my avatar in the beginning of their video, but also because I had a feeling that many of them had me in mind when they were asking these questions.
Greg, you were not the only person in that video. Hell, you weren't even the most obnoxious person in that video. How could you be? It had TJ Kirk and Chris Raygun in it.
So let's get to the video that they directed at the anti-SJW community. It starts off with the title card, "They tried to make fun of BuzzFeed videos while pwning SJWs." Now, I can't speak for everybody in the video. I certainly had the former in mind. I mean, who doesn't love making fun of BuzzFeed and showing how stupid the format of their videos is?
People who have better things to do and don't really care about BuzzFeed? Just a thought.
But I certainly wasn't trying to pwn anybody. My questions were meant as questions, and I'm pretty sure that I fucking said this already. So all I can say is, if you felt pwned, that speaks more to your convictions about your beliefs than it does about my perspective of your beliefs.
God, you're obnoxious.
Title card continues to say, but ended up making BuzzFeed videos look pretty good by comparison. First of all, that's a fucking lie. Everybody knows there's nothing that can make a BuzzFeed video look good.
Jeez, dude, did BuzzFeed kill your family or something? Good God.
Second of all, of course we weren't trying to live up to the prestigious BuzzFeed standards. It was a parody of BuzzFeed videos. This is one of those few instances where you can actually use the word satire.
Okay, he has a point about how no one really seems to understand what satire is anymore. But seriously, Greg, for as shallow and general as those BuzzFeed questions are, they're actually for the most part just addressing real concerns, not attacking a straw man.
Well, I mean, use it properly. Before I start actually answering the questions, I'm going to try my best not to fall into the same traps that other people who answered our questions fell into. I'm going to try my best not to take the questions personally and pretend that they're talking about me personally or attacking my position. And I'm also going to try my best to answer their questions honestly, regardless of how dishonest the question is.
We'll see how long that lasts.
Are you able to understand the irony of responding to the perceived political correctness of the left with exasperated reactionary hypersensitivity of your own?
To be 100% honest here, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. I can't think of a single anti-SJW type who has reacted with hypersensitivity. Now,
Oh, you want to see reactionary hypersensitivity? I've got plenty of it. Roll the clips.
So look at electric mayhem in the comments saying you don't tell them, you berate them. This is a person who fucking left a comment on one of Kevin Logan's videos one day saying you should be savagely beaten. You should be beaten to a pulp. Fuck you, bitch.
Which is ironic considering that before your stupid social justice feminine bullshit, it didn't happen on this scale. It's crazy. This is a disease of the modern age. You are responsible for perpetuating it by disenfranchising these poor fucking guys who don't have any options left. When someone takes the option of absolute, insanely last resort, you have to wonder what kind of system is producing them. And I tell you what, Lacey, it is a fucking feminist system that's doing this!
surely our reactions are over-exaggerated, but that's usually for either comedic purposes, for theatrical purposes, or just to essentially mock the position of a social justice warrior. Now,
Yeah, right. And I bet you also totally believed Tommy Wiseau when he said the room was intended to be a black comedy.
That's not to say that there aren't people who don't get overly sensitive when things that they hold dear are challenged by social justice warriors, but I'm only familiar with a very narrow sect within the anti-SJW community, the rational center-left, center-right group. I can't...
Greg, Carl Benjamin is not rational. TJ Kirk is not rational. Doxy the Kangaroo is not rational. Chris Ray Gun is not rational. I don't even like when people call you guys rational skeptics sarcastically. I've told friends of mine as much. It's just like Fox News calling themselves fair and balanced. Rational is not just a thing you can call yourself and it's automatically true.
I can't really relate with the anarcho-libertarians. I can't really relate with the traditional conservatives. I don't know how either of these two groups reacts to having their ideas challenged. I don't really think that hypersensitivity is a trait that's specifically attributed to the regressive left or the social justice community. I think hypersensitivity is more of a trait of an ideologue, part of an ideology, because people in ideologies don't like having their ideologies challenged. And I can't...
Ideologies are like bad breath and BO, darling. Everyone knows you have them except for you.
deny that there's a lot of people that consider themselves anti-SJWs or anti-feminists that are quite idealistic themselves, and they don't disagree with feminism because they disagree with ideology. And I personally am anti-social justice, anti-feminism, because I've noticed that those groups have become quite idealistic. But this is where it gets confusing because, like I said, I don't personally identify as anti-feminist or anti-SJW because I kind of feel those are meaningless terms. I'm not...
As far as anti-SJW, I would agree. Just like SJW, it has no real meaning. But anti-feminist does. Basically means being opposed to the theories, methods, and ideas that make up feminism and feminist discourse. An anti-feminist can refer to a person, a group, a publication, an event, etc.
Against the idea of social justice. I'm not against feminism as a whole. I don't see anything inherently wrong with those concepts. But the public sphere is quite full of people who are pro-SJW, pro-feminism, and I disagree with them quite regularly. Because of how influential they are, I make my disagreement public. And others call me anti-SJW, anti-feminist because of this action, but I feel that it's not a very helpful term.
Well, Greg, anytime I've seen you make a video calling out a feminist, all I really hear from your end is a lot of hot air. For example, in your response to Steve Shives, you say that no one's denying that rape happens. What we're denying is that there's a rape culture. Okay, what are you basing that on? When people talk about rape culture, we're talking about real things that happen, like victim blaming, such as people saying a rape victim is at fault because she had a few drinks or was dressed a certain way, or because he had an erection and guys always want it, obviously, supposedly. And rapists like Brock Turner getting off with the equivalent of a slap on the wrist. Real problems like that exist. I know you say I want to be a skeptic, but there's a big difference between being a skeptic and just being in denial and refusing to learn anything new about the issues you're uninformed about.
I'm gonna break this next question down because he asks several questions in one question.
How do you define right wing?
Now, I know it's hard to tell who's a right-winger and a left-winger because right-wingers, they blend right in with us. They look just like us. But it's not what they look like that makes them right-wing. It's their beliefs and their convictions and what they fight for is what makes them right-wing. Now, I'm actually starkly reminded on a regular basis that I'm surrounded by conservatives because they quite often say things that are quite disagreeable to me. Usually those things are regarding abortion, traditionalism, immigration, Christian values.
Firstly, I have a 2-year-old nephew and I don't even talk to him in that condescending a tone of voice. Secondly, sure, I actually live in a fairly liberal state, but we've still got our fair share of conservatives, so of course there are differences I can see. Next point.
Anti-SJWs often have an aversion to being labelled as right-wing, yet they regularly defend the right and bash the left. Therefore, why is being labelled right-wing a bad thing to you?
I think saying that we defend the right is a bit of an oversimplification. Certainly we'll defend right-wingers and the positions of right-wingers because it's pretty common for feminists and social justice warriors to completely misrepresent the positions of people on the right.
Ugh, citation please. The right wing in the US is in charge, is actively gutting public services, has tried to stamp down the freedom of speech, is taking us backward on the environment, and the religious right has been fighting tooth and nail for decades to strip reproductive rights. If I've missed anything at all, please hesitate to tell me.
But personally, I bash the left the most because of a few reasons. The first one being that they have the most influence right now in society, like academia, government, media, but
Stop. Seriously, stop right there. The left has more influence? Yeah, I don't think so, Tuxedo Mask. Your country's PM is Justin Trudeau, who from my understanding is more or less replicating the same kind of neoliberal crap the US Democrats have been doing for decades, which inevitably gave us Trump. So yeah, good luck with that, Canada. But seriously, in the US, the right wing, again, is currently in charge. Just about the only Western nation to gain full marital equality after we did was Australia. We put more money into our defense budget than into helping our own people, funding education, funding public services, or anything like that. Hell, if a Democrat in my country even thinks they're being called liberal, they'll do one of two things: cave to the Republicans, or grab a hunting rifle and go out into the woods to kill some poor cub's or chick's parent. Usually the former, but sometimes both. The media? Please. People of color, LGBTQ plus people, neurodivergent people, and the various intersections thereof are still barely represented. And for example, was there any real reason why Black Widow had to be the only female member of the Avengers? And then when movies like the new Star Wars trilogy and the newest Mad Max film, or the much anticipated Black Panther show up, Dude Bros in your and your friends' fan bases, and hell, some of your friends themselves, have histrionic meltdowns about them. And as far as academia, last time I checked, colleges and universities are places for learning, not having your destructive and regressive worldviews, whose coddled and treated is okay. And when I use the word regressive, I'm using the actual meaning of it, not the wah, social progress makes me cry definition.
Main reason I bash the left is because I am part of the left, and I really am disappointed at the direction that the left seems to be going right now.
Yeah, Greg, you're part of the left, and I'm the former Queen of Morocco.
The reason we have an aversion to being called right or conservative is because we're not right-wing.
Greg, if you want a tip, if you don't like being called right-wing, stop regurgitating their rhetoric. Maybe stop calling people SJWs and regressive and actually use your adult words and tell them why you think they're wrong.
The left has slid so far left that they see everyone to the right of them as being right-wing.
As a person who actually is on the hard left, I don't see this happening anywhere. In fact, in modern US politics, it's more mainstream, there really is no left.
They think anybody who's trying to conserve specific values as being conservative. And I personally don't like being lumped in with people who aren't pro-choice, or people who aren't pro-LGBT. Political positions are a spectrum, but that spectrum is quantifiable. Look at this little guy. This is me.
Greg has made some pretty transphobic remarks in the past, but that's neither here nor there. More importantly, someone seriously needs to sit this man down and tell him that he can't have his cake and eat it too.
To the left.
And if it's because right-wing is used as a pejorative, can you not see how labeling people as SJWs or regressives is also pejorative?
No, it's because conservative is a specific type of political position, one that I do not subscribe to. And the label SJW is supposed to be pejorative. It's an insult. The funny thing with that is that social justice warriors started identifying as social justice warriors, not realizing it's an insult. Or, I don't know, maybe they were just reclaiming it, trying to make it a positive term. Social justice warrior doesn't just refer to somebody who fights for social justice, because that's a lot of people on the left. Social justice warrior is somebody who does it in a very specific, dishonest way, who uses specific tactics to achieve their goals, who employs cognitive dissonance when defending their positions.
Examples? I mean, if you're going to make this claim, maybe you'll want to back it up. What kinds of cognitive dissonance? What kinds of dishonest tactics? Be specific.
The general use of the term in its inception was meant to point out to people that they were being intellectually dishonest. And most importantly, authoritarian. I personally am anti-SJW because I'm anti-authoritarian.
Holy straw man argument, Batman. That was a lot of guff to unpack. Firstly, Greg, I thought you didn't call yourself anti-SJW. You seem to go back and forth on that an awful lot. Secondly, you're awfully unspecific as to what so-called SJWs actually do that's actually authoritarian. As a libertarian socialist myself, I like to think of myself as anti-authoritarian, which is part of why, at least, I speak out against police brutality, the prison industrial complex, and the government dictating what we can and can't do with our own bodies. But it's laughable what reactionaries who endlessly whine about SJWs consider authoritarian. Being blocked by someone because they don't want to interact with you is not authoritarian. Being asked, not forced, to maybe not act like a bigoted shitbag is not authoritarian. Hearing someone point out an aspect of of a video game, comic book, film, or other piece of media being sexist, racist, or problematic is not authoritarian.
And the social justice community seems to have a very it's our way or the highway attitude towards people. Social justice warriors, the pejorative term version, social justice warrior, also refers to a person who can't handle an opinion outside of the opinion of the regressive left.
Yeah, I guess that's why y'all decided Dusty Smith wasn't one of you anymore when he called you out for your Trump support, or apologia, or apathy, while totally focused on crying about your imaginary boogeyman. That's why Thunderfoot couldn't sit with you anymore, even though he's made hundreds and hundreds of videos about how Anita Sarkeesian is apparently the Emperor, Judge Frollo, and Freddy Krueger all thrown in a blender. He called out Milo the pedo apologist, and later your own Carl wouldn't even be rapist Benjamin. And while we're on the subject of it's our way or the highway thinking, a lot of you accuse progressives on YouTube of doing the same thing to Lacey Green after she started fraternizing with the same people who raked her across the coals for years. Firstly, you have to keep in mind that most of us haven't even met Lacey, and seeing as myself and a lot of my friends who are labeled SJWs are mostly adults, aged around 25 to 50s, we're not really her audience. But more importantly, my problem, at least, wasn't that she wanted to talk to anti-feminists, but the fact that she backstabbed friends of hers in doing it and was two-faced and hypocritical about it all the way. Such as, I don't know, saying she'd never talk with Kevin Logan because of some harsh things he said to your girlfriend, which he later apologized for, while kissing up to Andy Worski, who hands out racist, heterosexist, and transphobic insults like they're candy, and at the moment is having weekly circle jerks with actual Nazis. Fuck me gently with a chainsaw. Those are some mixed messages right there. Not to mention the fact that Ed Green has been gaslighting her friends and fans and treating them like they're the unreasonable ones. But I digress.
Now, the regressive left, that's not a pejorative term. That is a practical, accurate term. Regressive means you are regressing society back to an earlier state. Yes, just because you're a social justice warrior, just because you fight for social justice, that doesn't make you a regressive. But, say, rebranding racial segregation as safe spaces, that's regressive. Trying to prove women are equal with men by treating women like children who need help, who can't take care of themselves, that's regressive.
Ugh, stuff to unpack again. Firstly, I loathe the term regressive left. It's like when hard-right idiots call liberals fascists. It's so clearly an oxymoron. In fact, if you were a little bit smarter, you could say being against regressing society is why you're not conservative. I did say a bit smarter. That's still not enough to convince the fleas on Loki's back to take you seriously. By definition, the left wants to move society forward, and the two examples you gave were piss poor. Firstly, I'm not even going to dignify your idiocy on safe spaces. I'll let one of your esteemed fellow countrywomen do that for me.
Organization that pretends to be an allegory for the military. In fact, this is where that rhetoric about safe spaces comes from. A safe space is a small area set aside in a university, akin to a student lounge, where some students, typically LGBT, can relax without being subjected to the racist, sexist, homophobic, or transphobic rhetoric of their peers. In fact, their existence implies that these rules are not enforced on the rest of the campus. It's actually better for conservatives that these rooms exist, because without them, their vulgar nonsense would simply be banned campus-wide. But many conservatives hate the idea that students can be in a situation where they can be exempt from their nonsensical proselytizing, so they've spun a narrative that safe spaces are a place where people can hide from different opinions and ban anything that doesn't fit the progressive.
Thank you, Lily. Secondly, treating women like children. Yeah, this from the guy who defends his girlfriend for any and all backlash she gets for acting like an asshole by essentially saying, "Look at that cute little face." Also, I'm pretty sure Dr. Winters already told you why this argument is completely full of shit.
Now, obviously, I can't speak for everybody. Clearly, there are people who just use the term social justice warrior to refer to anybody that is left-leaning and they disagree with. In fact, I've been called a social justice warrior because I'm pro-LGBT, pro-civil rights, pro-choice. So I've got conservatives on the one side of me who call me social justice warrior, that call me regressive.
It's actually pretty shocking that the fact that you've been called a social justice warrior tells you absolutely nothing about how meaningless a term it actually is.
Because they don't know what those terms mean. Those terms have lost all meaning, but I know that I personally use them for their original intended purpose. But on the other hand...
Listen, Greg, I don't know if you realize this, but you don't actually need to call people SJWs. You can simply call them wrong or misinformed and explain why by backing it up with evidence. You know, what an actual skeptic does.
I've got fucking liberals like you on the far left who look at me and they're calling me a conservative. It's not fair. I'm being alienated from both sides.
Aw, you poor little thing. Yeah, I know that seems harsh, but just wait.
I actually have an expression that I like to use quite often. The difference between a progressive and a regressive. A progressive wants to remove the stigma of being abnormal, but a regressive wants to add a stigma to being normal.
Gregory, there you go again with your straw man arguments. First of all, what is normal? That word already has a lot of baggage to it. Moreover, whatever you describe as normal, how are so-called regressives trying to stigmatize it? And I'm asking for actual evidence, not random, possibly troll blogs from that website used by teenagers you all hate so much.
Progressive wants to equal the playing field and give everybody equal opportunity and equal power. A regressive just wants to shift the power.
You are making a lot of claims and citing zero evidence. You're not very good at this whole skeptic thing.
Rather than telling people you disagree with to drink bleach, wouldn't it be more productive for you to have an actual conversation about the issues you feel matter? Or is it just easier to do the bleach thing?
Again, I can't really relate to this. I'm not the type of person to tell somebody I disagree with to do any kind of harm to themselves. In fact, I'm more in the camp of people who, when we're in an argument that frustrates us, we are more likely to joke that we're going to do harm to ourselves or drink bleach ourselves, but maybe that's just our sense of humor. But in the off chance that this is in reference to what Anthony, the needle drop, said in TJ's video towards SJWs, I just have to say that I personally would not have put that in my video if I was making a video directed towards social justice warriors or feminists, but that wasn't my choice. That was Anthony's choice and TJ's choice to do.
Okay then, that leads me to this question. Why do you choose to associate with grown men who tell their political opponents to drink bleach? I mean, I wouldn't want to be friends with people like that.
What is it with you people and skulls? No, seriously, what is it with you people and skulls? For the last time, what is it with you people and committing actual literal felonies? Like, you might want to work on that? I mean, I thought the Ralph retort was so rational when he was fantasizing about beating up women with dyed hair, but then he assaulted a police officer, and finally I was convinced.
I get this as a joke, but I'm still gonna comment on this. Obviously, it's ridiculous to lump in all anti-social justice warriors to the actions of Ralph retort. Otherwise, I might feel compelled to lump in all feminists or social justice warriors into the kinds of felonies and inhuman things that social justice warriors have done.
One citation. That's all I ask for, Greg. One measly citation. I'm no longer one of your fans. I'm not going to assume something's true just because you said it.
But I think it's funny the three people he chose to critique here, Davis Arini, Mundane Matt, and Ralph retort, all three of these people don't like me at all. Davis Arini doesn't like me because I keep calling him out on his bullshit, and he's very sensitive about that. Mundane Matt doesn't like me because I've made fun of him too many times, and he's unfollowed me and unsubscribed from me. And Ralph retort doesn't like me because he's a 4-foot-tall beanbag chair of a man with a penis the size of a grape. And he's also written an article about me just talking about how much he doesn't like me. Plus, Davis and Ralph are perfect examples of tradcons, traditional conservatives who just happen to be anti-social justice warrior, but because they themselves are quite authoritarian, they subscribe to a different form of authority. They don't like authoritarian left because the authoritarian left wants a different kind of authority than them. That's their difference. The only thing we have in common with conservative anti-social justice warriors is that we both don't like the regressive left. Other than that, we probably wouldn't get along very well if the regressive left wasn't around. In fact, if the regressive left wasn't around, I'd be making videos about the fucking authoritarian right, like I used to.
Gregory, I'm going to try one last time to get through to you. You haven't cited anything that proves the people you call SJWs or regressive leftists are authoritarian. It's not automatically true just because you want it to be true. You need to prove it, provide evidence, or shut your pseudo-skeptical pie hole.
You claim to be proponents of rational, logical, evidence-based argumentation. That's great. That's entirely laudable. But when I look at your online activity, when I look at, I don't know, for example, your Twitter feed, that's often not what I see. How do you reconcile this claim to be evidence-based and rational and logical against stuff like, oh, I was just trolling you, oh, I was just shitposting, or TLDR?
Dude, Twitter is Twitter.
How very profound.
Some of us are on Twitter because we like dem dank memes. Some of us are on Twitter because we like shitposting and fucking around and joking around and trolling and just having fun. Also, Twitter's a good place to just post our natural reactions to things. Yes, I personally am a reasonable, rational person who requires evidence to come to conclusions about things. But just because I have a personal conviction to use evidence and reason and logic to come to my conclusions doesn't preclude me from the possibility of just fucking around online and having fun.
Yeah, that's nice and all, Greg, but I feel the need to point out that you often use your Twitter to push information and just crap such as roll the clips.
Gotta be honest here, your question just makes you sound like an old man who's completely out of touch with today's youth. Sometimes I like to have debates on Twitter, sometimes I like to propose ideas in a rational, reasonable way, but Twitter's not really a great platform to have intellectual debates.
Fair enough that Twitter's not the place for debates and you like to have fun with it, but that's no excuse for spreading misinformation or just generally acting like a callous shit human.
Are you aware that the ridiculous buzzwords you helped to popularize, like SJW and cuck and regressive, have all lost whatever meaning they once had and only serve now as catch-all insults and pejoratives to derail any meaningful conversation?
Yeah. And I'm just as unhappy about it as you are. Bet you didn't expect me to say that.
Then seriously, why do you keep doing it in this video?
But since you brought up the words losing all meaning thing, I am personally more concerned with terms like racism and sexism losing all meaning because the social justice community tosses them around to suggest that anybody that disagrees with them, even on a minute issue, is overtly racist and sexist. I mean, literally the same people that will say, oh, you're misrepresenting feminism, look at the dictionary definition of feminism, will just completely change the definition of racism and sexism to fit their narrative. And the reason I'm more concerned with this is because if everything's racist and everything's sexist, then nothing is.
Firstly, I feel the need to point out that words can have different meanings. I could go on and on about how little use I personally have for the dictionary definition of feminism. In fact, I've seen more anti-feminists shove that argument under my nose than feminists, but I'd be here all day. Sexism and racism, however, in sociological terms, do have different meanings at the micro or individual and macro, systemic, or institutionalized levels. I'll provide some links below as per usual.
It diminishes the importance of things that are actually racist and sexist and bigoted.
I love it when white men try to define what's really racist and sexist. Do I really love that? Or does it give me migraines?
In videos and in the comment sections, anti-feminists often take up the most extreme or the weakest feminist position they can find, or they just straight up misrepresent what the feminist position is. Instead, why not take up the strongest, most robust feminist argument you can find and really challenge yourself?
I'm pretty sure that Christy Winters is physically incapable of asking somebody a question without coming across as the most condescending person that ever existed.
You are so black.
I'm not black, you're black.
I'm not black, you're black.
I don't know what you're talking about. You're so obviously the black one. I mean, for crying out loud.
First of all, what is the feminist position? Because I know that anybody that tries to lump feminists in together, especially when it comes to their opinions, the first thing that's said is feminism is not a monolith. And to that, I fully agree. So to say that there is a feminist position, you are misrepresenting your own movement. Again,
Okay, first of all, Tuxedo Mask, you constantly speak like you're addressing an audience of mentally challenged ferrets, and really have no business talking shit about anyone else being condescending. Secondly, it's amazing that even though you didn't chop up Christie's question, you still misunderstood it. The in question doesn't refer to some vaguely ultimate feminist question trademark symbol, but rather to a strong feminist argument that a hypothetical anti-feminist would find and make an honest attempt to rebut.
I can't speak for everybody, but I personally don't choose arguments to debunk based on the argumentation style itself. I couldn't fucking care less. What I care about is what they're advocating for. So the robustness of the argument is irrelevant to me. If the arguments truly are robust and they're right, chances are the reason I'm not debunking it is because it's not something I disagree with.
Well, great, but robust is not now, nor has it ever been a word.
Almost kind of suggesting here too that all of the weaker arguments are also correct, they're just misrepresenting your movement. Plus you're suggesting anti-social justice is a monolith who just inherently sees everything feminists say and do as being wrong.
You mean that's not the case?
I don't like that straw man, Christy, and I refuse to buy into it. Almost everything about your question is wrong. This whole question kind of just sounds like a very roundabout way of begging the anti-social justice warrior community to debunk your videos more often. And it kind of shows how little you think of the majority of the feminist community.
You know what's funny? I consider myself a YouTube feminist, and I've never felt disrespected by Christy. You, on the other hand, yeah.
I am deeply concerned with male addiction rates, suicide rates, and abuse rates, because I have worked with these issues in the quote-unquote real world. Would you be willing as anti-feminists to put aside your differences with feminists for the greater good of addressing these issues, especially as the kind of solutions needed are not necessarily gendered? And if so, I would actually like you to let me know, because I'm not fucking around or presenting any gotchas here. I actually really think that we could get something done if we work together. So, yeah.
I personally don't care what your label is. I don't care if you're a feminist, an anti-feminist, a men's rights activist, a MGTOW, whatever. As long as we both agree on an issue, and it's an issue that needs to be addressed, I am willing to discuss and work on that issue with anybody. I don't like labels. Again, I hate that I'm called an anti-feminist or an anti-social justice warrior. I really reject that title because that's such a small facet of what I am. And those are all issues that I've actually helped bring awareness to before. Shoeonhead and I actually hosted a stream bringing awareness to male domestic abuse victims, as well as underfunded men's shelters. And if I had known at the time that you would have been willing to participate in that stream, I would have invited you on without hesitating. I don't care that you call yourself a feminist. I don't care that you have opinions that I possibly don't agree with you on, but I have to admit that I'm actually a little bit surprised by this question because men's issues are not a topic that feminists like to talk about. In fact, many feminists like to pretend that men have no issues at all. And even just bringing up men's issues can earn you a label men's rights activist or misogynist or sexist from some asshole like Steve Shy. Oh, Jesus.
Oh boy. More unpacking. Firstly, for someone who supposedly hates labels so much, you're really wishy-washy about it, Greg. Secondly, feminists talk about men's issues often, like domestic abuse, toxic masculinity, mental illness, as Chris mentioned, and surely you are since you're aware they're male feminists, right? You must be aware since you share the reactionary community's same raging hate boner for Steve Shives. Yeesh, that's one reason I'm glad not to be more popular.
Of feminism. It's like the same difference between baby boomer and Generation X. It's just an age of feminists, because second wave feminists are still around. Now, I personally...
Firstly, the first part of the question was obviously rhetorical, and I'm gonna need a citation on Naomi Wolf coining the term. I have not seen that anywhere.
Again, don't see anything wrong with feminism on its own, but I think that when people say they have a problem specifically with third wave feminism, they mean the kinds of things that the modern era of feminism fights for. Because they don't agree that what the modern feminists are fighting for are things that need to be fought for, but more specifically, I think what they're referring to are the tactics that modern feminists use, and the type of authoritarian society they're trying to usher in is something that they have a problem with. But if I were to generalize feminism in the way that you suggest anti-feminists do, I would say that second wave and first wave were less objectionable, because even though they did terrible things, and even though there were things that they were fighting for, again, that I don't agree with, at least first wave feminism had legitimate causes, like they couldn't vote. Women weren't allowed to do certain things. Women didn't even have the same rights as men. And then second wave feminism kind of just picked up where first wave feminism left off, and then also covered a social aspect, like removing stigmas for women being more promiscuous, or women choosing to work, or women choosing to be more independent, women choosing to be educated and work higher end jobs, and also helped to usher in laws to protect women from discrimination, including in the workplace. But third wave feminists seem more concerned with giving women extra rights that men don't have, and helping women achieve things over men, instead of creating an equal environment where women can achieve equally with men. Instead of making things easier for women, they're making things harder for men, and that's not what equality is about. They seem more concerned with women getting more power than men than having equal power with men. But again, that's just if I were to generalize the way you suggest anti-feminists do.
Greg, I'm not even going to dignify your vague claims of third wave feminists being authoritarian or trying to shove men down, mostly because these are claims for which you give zero examples and provide zero support. More importantly, the second and first waves of feminism were great if you were a straight cis white woman from an economically secure background. Hell, at the first Women's March on Washington, the white suffragettes made the black women, who also wanted voting rights obviously, march behind them and really did fuck all for women in the working class. The second wave was quite transphobic and spawned lesbian separatism, so I'd kind of think anti-fems would hate it more since second wavers were more likely to be anti-male. But with the third wave, women of color are letting ourselves be heard like never before. Our trans sisters and brothers get more support. Hell, even things like toxic masculinity, something men's rights activists were angry with second wavers for not coming out more strongly against, and other men's issues are being addressed.
Why is it that this feminist represents all feminists, but this men's rights activist doesn't represent all men's rights activists?
Whoa, wait! Sexism all of a sudden? Ladies and men are different? So we're supposed to punch men and not hit ladies and open doors for men, but not ladies? Fuck you! Get out of my face, you tiny piece of shit!
I agree. Those are equally hilarious. Oh, God. Yes, Trigglypuff doesn't represent all feminists, and that fucking guy at McDonald's doesn't represent all MRAs. But would you be surprised to know that I don't see feminism and men's rights activism as being entirely different? And even just bringing up that I felt that way got me like a week-long deluge of angry tweets and comments from men's rights activists on Twitter and YouTube. Now, I'm not saying that they're literally the same thing exactly. I'm not saying feminists do the exact same thing as MRAs. Perhaps this is a discussion for a different video.
Yes, please discuss all the nonsense you just said in a future video. I can hardly wait.
Why am I continually asked to answer for the views of feminists if I agree with feminism's overall aims, but don't agree much with those particular feminists? Does that mean that I can ask you to answer for anybody who labels themselves similarly to you, even if you don't agree much?
I feel like I've already answered this question, basically, in earlier questions. But yes, obviously, I don't lump all feminists together, and I don't encourage other people to do that. What you're basically describing there, though, is identity politics, and that is the scourge of modern social discussion. So this is a message to everybody, on all sides. If somebody identifies as something, that does not mean that they're the exact same as everyone else that identifies as that thing. And if somebody acts the same way as somebody that identifies as a thing, that does not mean that you can then label them as that thing you don't like, especially to dismiss them and their arguments.
That's nice and all, but it's an empty platitude when that's all using the term SJW is about, and you continue to use it.
If SJWs are bad because they spend too much time whining and don't talk about real problems, then why aren't you talking about those problems instead of just whining about the other people over and over and over for literally years? I mean, in the scale of priorities, that's like even lower, right? You know, you've got the real problems, you've got the things that feminists worry about, and then you've got you going, oh, how dare they? Just, how dare they have different priorities from me? Why can't they do what I do? Whine about whining forever for a living. That's healthy.
Well, this one's actually pretty simple. I do talk about real issues. I do talk about things that are more important. And when I do, I'm called an Islamophobic. So that's fun. Basically, the point I'm making here is that the not real issues that feminists are complaining about are either covering up and apologizing for the real issues, detracting from the real issues, or creating new, worse issues.
Again, I say, you poor little thing. I'm sorry, you can think of no other issues in the world than something Islamic extremism. You are aware that you can talk about problems that have nothing to do with religion or SJWs, right? It's not a new phenomenon.
Why don't you seem as concerned with actual feminist theory in academia as you are with wrecking people for views?
Oh no, I am quite concerned with academia, but I'm not so good with the reading. I've actually got a good deal of the dyslexia. So I leave the academic papers to people like Thunderfoot and Sargon. They do a much better job of that kind of thing than me.
First of all, bullshit. I'm sorry, but I don't accept learning disabilities as excuses for kids I tutor not doing their schoolwork, and I'm not going to accept them from a grown man who chooses, emphasis on chooses, to talk about real-world issues. Secondly, my younger brother has problems reading. He just finished high school last year and has just started college. How? Audiobooks. They're a thing. Documentaries are also a thing. Hey, in my journeys on becoming a better teacher, I've come across YouTube videos that explain politics and history in a way that kids can understand, and academic websites with audio components. Thirdly, Carl is good with theory. Don't... Greg, you're gonna make coffee come out of my nose.
More of like an in-the-trenches kind of guy. I like to think of myself as the good Johnny in the hole that's got the good gun and the good sight and knows what the fuck is going on. Sure, the war would end faster if I were to shoot my gun at the general instead of the guys in the trench across from me, but that's not my role in this. My role is to deal with the practical application of feminism as we see it online and in society. Plus, academics don't tend to make a lot of YouTube videos, so it's very difficult to make debunk videos of the things that they say. Besides, I find that it's easier to communicate to people how feminism and feminists are affecting society directly because they can see it, it's more observable. I find that more abstract concepts like feminist theory kind of go over people's heads. It's kind of difficult for people to absorb, but something like Anita Sarkeesian, that's easy to see, that's observable, that's easy to dissect. It's easy for people to understand how Anita is directly affecting society. It's not so easy to see how the professor who taught her feminist theory was able to convince her of the silly concepts that she perpetuates.
Greg, I'm sorry, but are you really so full of shit that you've gone deaf and you can't even hear the idiocy that's coming out of your own mouth? First of all, there are two academics in this very video. You haven't debunked anything they've said so far. Secondly, what exactly do you see about how feminism is negatively impacting society? I've seen that June goes to the mall and takes pictures of pop feminist products like clothing and water bottles. So there's that, but that's capitalism for you. They'll jump on whatever trend they think is, popular. Thirdly, I hate to burst this strange bubble you live in, but no one in the real world gives a flying shit in space what Anita Sarkeesian did, said, whatever. I actually asked my baby brother, who's an avid gamer, what he thought about her, and he'd never even heard of her before. You all are nothing if not experts at the Streisand effect.
Since so many of you profess to be admirers of second-wave feminism as opposed to third-wave feminism, I thought it would be interesting to ask which second-wave feminists in particular do you appreciate? Which books written by second-wave feminists have you read and found interesting? Which second-wave feminist activists have you specifically admired as you formed the opinion that you like second-wave feminism but you have no use for third-wave feminism? I'm just curious.
I think I just threw up a little bit in my mouth. Seriously, for a guy who hates being called conservative, here's a little advice. Get your confirmation bias for someone other than Christina Hoff Sommers.
You do understand that reading the title of a book or an article or watching the first 15 seconds of a video is not going to give you a deep, nuanced understanding of what that book or article or video is about, right? That being said, how can you expect to understand or critique feminist sources if you don't even attempt to understand what they're trying to say? Yeah, another one that really doesn't apply to me. Everybody knows I make these teal deer fucking long videos. But I'll ask you a question. Do you realize that not wearing a shirt in a video makes you look like a fucking douche?
Charming. By the way, Greg, the Zach Morris hairstyle didn't even look good when Zach Morris wore it.
Why is trying and failing to debunk a study into sexual assault the #1 priority for a rational thinker now? Does it maybe say something about your priorities? Nah, it's fine, it's the feminazis, we have to stop them. They're taking away our video games.
You realize that your question isn't even consistent with itself? You said that our priority is to debunk some sexual assault study. You didn't say which one. But then you say the priority is to say video games. The only one that I can think of that comes up on a regular basis is that study that was done in a university to determine how many female university students get sexually assaulted. Is this that fucking 1 in 4 thing? That has been successfully debunked. It doesn't follow the scientific method even. And you're right, why would we want to debunk some study that lies about the inherent nature of male sexual behavior that essentially paints men as these barbaric men that just gotta go around fucking, and women are just inherently going to be victims in life. They have a 1 in 4 chance that they're gonna be a fucking sexual assault victim. Yeah, a lie like that won't affect anything. Ever. I love the idea of women having this idea in their head that there's a 1 in 4 chance that I'll rape them. That's fine.
Oh, he's such a well-adjusted person. You're so hurt by one study that we can't even have conversations about consent, keeping students safe on campus, and so on. You've got more screwed up priorities than the brony community.
One of the major arguments that I see in many of your videos is that it is possible to separate criticism of the religion of Islam from the actual Muslim people. And yet, this line seems to be crossed very often. I see things like raghead or camel fucker or other things like that in your comment sections. I see people taking very serious shots at Muslims in videos and hangouts, and they don't get called out, at least not that I can see. So my question is this: why should a person of conscience who is concerned about the Muslim people and their community not being harmed or mistreated, why should they believe that you're actually only attempting to look at the ideas and talk about the ideas if you ignore bigotry that's occurring right in front of you? And in that light, would you be willing to break bread and salt with moderate Muslim people on your videos, have hangouts, invite them to your channels, just in order to build some bridges there and to learn more about what they think and how they feel and what their experience has been, so that information and knowledge can be furthered?
I absolutely reject the idea that I am responsible for things that people say in my comment section. I can't control what people are going to say, and I don't feel like it's my responsibility to moderate my comment section, nor I know I'm just gonna come across like an asshole here, but until you have like over 50,000 subscribers, you don't know what kind of a monumental undertaking that would actually be. And
So, in other words, you're just lazy and you don't care. I must say, I think the idea that by holding your audience accountable to conduct themselves with maturity and civility, you're controlling them shows a lot of contempt for your audience. I make response videos to some really vile people, and I always tell my viewers, don't attack this person, I said what I needed to hear, or such similar, because no matter what I think about the person in question, I respect my audience, however small it is, enough to expect adult behavior from them. You have a way bigger audience than I do, which means you have a bigger influence. You could be influencing people to actually behave with civility, but you choose not to. Shame on you.
I think universally everybody has this kind of understanding that what's said and done in a hangout isn't necessarily serious. A lot of people use hangouts as an opportunity to joke around. And yes, racial jokes are tossed around, but racial jokes being overt bigotry is not generally a position that non-social justice warriors tend to have. That seems to be more of an extreme left position, that race jokes are off the table. Now,
oh yeah, because I love getting comments like this. And the fact that they're probably just jokes actually means something to me. I promise it really does. It makes all the difference in the world.
well, streams aren't really a thing that I do on my channel, but if I were to do streams, then yes, I would most definitely want to have a Muslim on my channel. And I would want a Christian, and I would want a Buddhist. Oh, I'm not a Buddhist, that's boring.
Do you deny that systemic racism against black people is like a thing in general? If so, what? Okay, just step up. Just cover your ears for a second and let the smart people talk. If not, why is it so much more important to you to demonize groups like Black Lives Matter than to actually use your platforms to discuss actual solutions to issues surrounding race and racism?
I don't think I would go as far as to say that there is no such thing as systemic racism, but I would say that the concept that has been put forward that systemic racism still exists today has not been fully quantified nor proven to be true. I think I would say that I'm skeptical that it exists, because I don't even know what you mean by systemic. What system? What is the system? In what way is it racist? Who is perpetuating the racism? Who is in charge of this system? Who runs the system?
First of all, if you're skeptical about systemic racism, that movie made just for you got a whole buttload of Oscar noms. But more importantly, links below. It must be really nice to need all this information spoon-fed to you because you don't experience it yourself.
What is the system? What I see is individual racists in positions of power that are left unchecked. And I have just started a series on racism, actually, and I don't think that anybody could say that they can predict what direction it's gonna go.
He seems to be done with that series, and it was crap, predictably.
But what I would say is that what I've discovered so far is people like to say that fucking everything is racist, like literally fucking everything is racist. And like I said earlier in this video, when everything's racist, nothing is racist. I think what my specific focus on racism is to clarify what real racism is, and what actual oppression is, and how it needs to be properly defined before we can even properly attack the problem.
Oh, that's very big of you, white man who loves paraphrasing the villain from The Incredibles. You clearly can define what racism is.
If you've ever discussed or done a video about black-on-black crime, when are you going to do a video about white-on-white crime and what we, as white people, can do to solve the problems in our community?
I've never made a proper statement in a video about race-related crime, but the black-on-black crime thing only really comes up in the skeptic community as it relates to the narrative being pushed by Black Lives Matter. And you're completely ignoring the most important piece of the puzzle, is that it is being discussed in reference to Black Lives Matter. And the criticism that is often brought up is that Black Lives Matter, if they really cared about black lives, they would criticize black-on-black crime just as harshly as white-on-black crime.
As I've said before, black on black crime is only brought up as a red herring / derailing tactic. None of you reactionaries really care about it. You just want to shut up the mean black people who are making you feel uncomfortable by talking about racism. What's that a lot of you say about reals over feels? Furthermore, Black Lives Matter is a specific activist group with a specific aim, i.e. to bring more attention to systemic racism against black people and other people of color by police services.
Because more black people die from being killed by other black people than by police or other white people. And their narrative is that there's some conspiracy to treat black people worse, to kill them off, to just not even care about their lives. And their narrative suggests that their lives matter and that white people treat them as if their lives don't. But even within their own community, within their own skin color, I hate lumping people in by color. But you have to do it now, because to refute the arguments that people make now, you have to follow the whole everybody is the race that they're born into thing, so thanks for fucking bringing this up. But if Black Lives...
I don't even have any fake sympathy left for privileged a-holes whining about how much hearing about race and racism bothers them. I just want to get through this.
Matter to the black community as much as they say they do, then they wouldn't ignore the biggest cause of violent deaths to black people, which is other black people. But nobody fucking talks about this, especially in the media, so it's left to us. We have to talk about it. We have to be the ones to say, hey, nobody's mentioning that most violent black deaths are from black people. Hey, stop listening to the media. The media is gonna start a fucking race war. Let's not have a race war, and let's look at everything in perspective, please. I will make a video about white on white crime when White Lives Matter comes out and tries to say that all black people are trying to kill all white people. That's when you'll get my white on white crime video. You know, apparently Christy Winters is the author of this video, and I find it ironic that this video is called Reasonable Questions, and so far all of her questions have been the most intellectually dishonest. Just putting the word reasonable in the title does not automatically make that video reasonable.
I wonder if perhaps he had a moment of self-awareness with that statement and his own label of skeptic.
Why is
Probably
a literal
not.
teenager's different definition of racism from you so horrifying that you all have to go, no! No, we have to stop him! We've got to debunk him now! Ah!
Hey, one that I know for sure relates to me. I talked about Milo, but not because I sought Milo out, but because ContraPoints, he admitted accidentally, referenced me in a video about Milo that had nothing to do with me. And it made me aware of the situation, and I made that video as a starting point on a series about how there's a whole narrative being discussed within the social justice community that is completely bastardizing the definition of racism and sexism and now transphobia.
You're Streisand affecting again.
And how this narrative is damaging to society and can really fuck things up. The point is that Milo is a microcosm of a bigger problem. And how do you show your audience that this problem exists if you can't find examples? And Milo was an amazing example. Because of how young and naive he is, it shows how influential feminism is on young minds. Or you could just, you know, do the TJ thing and just make fun of him. Whatever.
Wherever did you get the idea that racism was a self-applied identity?
Oh my god.
And if the only true racists are the racists who self-identify as racists, how can we ever expect to make any social progress to reduce racism? Or did I just answer my own question?
I don't know, Steve. I've never been very good at answering the straw man that you create. You tell me. But I can say that a narrative that I hear on the social justice side of the argument is that the only people that aren't racist are the ones that say they are. And I gotta say that that's equally as useless a concept as the straw man. Generally, racist people admit that they believe that their race is in some way superior to other races. Is it just that you want to believe that everyone who says they're not racist just is and they won't admit it? Is that what this question is about? I mean, God, you should see some of the stuff that alt-right people send me. It's so fucking racist. I can't stand it. And to say that everyone's inherently a little bit like that is so fucking insulting.
On second thought, I don't think Greg's ready for Get Out. He'll probably be one of those whiny little randos on IMDb bawling about how it's racist against white people.
You often say that you are for equality of opportunity, but if people of color, for instance, have to overcome barriers whites do not, such as discrimination and unequal treatment as are well documented in various studies, then how can the current situation be thought of as equal opportunity in any real way? And why do you consider it racist to discuss these issues?
Oh, I still think the egalitarian idea of meritocracy and the equality of opportunity has not been fully achieved. And one of the movements that is hindering that is feminism. Feminism wants equality of outcome, which spits in the face of egalitarian meritocracy. So how...
Good holy gravy, will you ever cite a source for any of this nonsense you ascribe to feminism? You can't turn in your first draft and expect a passing grade.
How am I going to help society achieve a sense of egalitarian meritocracy? Well, I gotta get the thing that is standing in the way of that out of the way, right? I'm sure race factors into people's abilities to achieve at some point in their lives, but I see poverty as being a bigger factor in somebody's likelihood of achieving in adulthood. Now, you could say, oh, well, people of color are more likely to be impoverished. That's true, but that's a discussion for a whole other video too. Because if you want to suggest that people of color are poor because of their race, then you have to demonstrate that society is explicitly forcing them to remain in this situation.
Greg, can I ever visit your world? The imaginary land wherein race and class have little to do with each other and rags to riches, or even rags to comfortable wealth stories are apparently common?
Do you understand basic English syntax? Like, you know, if I say, this cat is pretty, I don't mean that all other cats aren't pretty. Like, do you really not get why saying all lives matter in response to Black Lives Matter is not only racially insensitive, but just patently ridiculous?
Oh, I get it, because saying all lives matter means black lives don't matter, right? I'm not one of those people that has ever said all lives matter, especially in response to the Black Lives Matter mantra, but I honestly don't see how the statement all lives matter is in any way in opposition to the Black Lives Matter statement. All lives include black people. That being said, though, I also don't really see the problem with the statement Black Lives Matter. I don't see that as in any way in opposition to all lives matter either. Honestly, I don't fucking care what their mantra is. The real issue with Black Lives Matter is that they've created an environment where racial tension is worse than it's been in over a decade, definitely since I was a fucking kid. Protesters suggesting cops die, protesters actually killing cops, and I get that these things are not endorsed by the leaders of the movement, but the point is the movement has outgrown the original intentions of the leader. It's gone fucking batshit crazy. Yes, we need more police accountability across the board. We need more lenient reactions from police for non-violent crime, but that doesn't justify some of the things people have done in the name of Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, Black Lives Matter created that. You're so right, Greg. You're so right, and we bow before you. No. Racism has always been the reality for people of color. It just bothers you that more people are speaking out about it and making you feel uncomfortable. Tough shit.
Isn't it offensive to men to assume that a man could only ever want equality for women, and therefore be comfortable with feminism as a whole in order to get laid, and that reduces us to beasts?
I don't see how that's in any way offensive to men in general. Only social justice warriors lump demographics of people into groups like that. First of all, offense is not given, it's taken. Offense is not something that I generally have ever felt. I can't remember the last time I felt offended.
Oh, you can't? I've counted at least 10 times when you've gotten whiny or pissy about being called names, or even thinking people are calling you names within this very video. Remember, Pumpkin, offense is taken, not given.
Because I am not the type of person to identify with the demographic people try to shove me into. Now, if somebody were to say that it's inherently a male trait to white knight for women specifically to get laid, that would not be an offensive statement, but that would be a mischaracterization of men. Do you see the difference there? Why are so many of these people trying to apply social justice logic to our thinking? Do they like truly not understand how we think?
Not funny, plus not funny,
Equals not fucking funny!
I mean, do these people have to go back to Film 101? If you want a joke to work, you need humor.
Don't you know that?
Your attempts at comedy are physically hurting me.
These questions are all legitimately making me feel like the anti-social justice community as a whole understands social justice warriors and the way social justice warriors think like a fuck ton better than social justice warriors understand how non-social justice warriors think. And I don't mean anti-social, I mean like fucking like literally everyone else. You don't even understand how normal people think. You can't even relate to us and make arguments to us based on our own logic. That's how you win arguments with people who are fundamentally different. That's how you win arguments with people who aren't in the same ideology as you. You have to learn the way they think and use their own logic to debunk their way of thinking. This is crazy how stupid some of these questions are. So many of these questions are like, well, if you apply my way of thinking to this, doesn't this make me right?
And you have the gall to whine about these people strawmanning you. You are
If that was the
so
case, wouldn't I attempt
folded.
to get laid from my views instead of not ever trying that?
What?
If you say you're an egalitarian, will you call out the man-hating slurs that you see coming from people within your community? People who use terms like cuck, beta male, faggot, or mangina? All of these things basically distill men down into thinking that the most important thing about them is to be having sex with a woman. That's rather offensive.
Yes, to a feminist. Like, I literally just finished saying this. What? I feel like I'm going crazy. We're not feminists. We don't get offended by this kind of stuff. The whole whittling people down to their whatever, that's feminist logic, not egalitarian logic.
So what are you doing to stop this kind of behavior in your community?
Nothing. Name-calling is not a priority within the egalitarian anti-social justice field. We don't fucking care about name-calling. Feminists do.
We do not care about name-calling. But don't ever call me right-wing or accuse me of coddling bigots because that'll totes make me cry. Give me a break.
What is happening? I thought she was supposed to be the smart one.
What a coincidence, because I thought you were smart too, Greg. Until I realized how piss-easy debunking creationist is, and that you can't be bothered to research anything
The real
you're not
question
familiar
is,
with.
if this is something that you as a feminist see as a problem, why are you not dealing with this? Why is feminism more preoccupied with how things affect women and minorities? If this is something that you see as a feminist, why are you not fighting this?
What is the number of followers, the number of likes, the number of dislikes, the number of retweets, the number of subscribers? Any of those numbers, any of those metrics, what have they got to do with the argument?
Nothing, which is why I have literally never once brought up any of those metrics in an argument.
That's nice. That's another question that probably wasn't for you, but plenty of your reactionary pals use the argument from popularity all the time.
Why is it that you go on and fucking on about safe spaces and trigger warnings and delicate little flowers, but continue to hide behind your cartoon avatars and your childish pseudonyms?
Get a good look, fucking pervert. Soak it all in.
I'm not gonna lie, Greg is actually quite handsome. You know, if he weren't so intellectually lazy, pretentious, grating, and rude personality-wise, he might be my type. But nope.
And whenever anyone calls you out on your sexist, racist, homophobic, bigoted rhetoric, you become the argument of your own scorn and are hashtag triggered, as they say.
That's never happened. The social justice sphere seems to have a completely different definition for the words sexist and racist. And simply disagreeing with things that a feminist says can be considered sexist, and disagreeing with things that a Black Lives Matter member says, or something that Islam says, can receive you the title racist. And those are complete misuses of those terms. And those terms are inherently damaging. They can ruin people's lives. Imagine what would happen if I found out that one time you didn't explicitly ask verbal permission from a woman before you had sex with her. And after finding this out, I decided to go around and tell everybody that you're a rapist. I can imagine that would be quite triggering to you.
Firstly, Islam is not a person. Ergo, it doesn't say words. But more importantly, I did touch on my annoyance with bigoted and or destructive views being trivialized as just a difference of opinion previously. And since Greg chose not to go into any kind of real detail about what constitutes these disagreements, I assume that's the kind of thing he's referring to. People wonder why feminists, anti-racist protesters, college activists, LGBTQ plus people, and various intersections thereof are so angry all the time. None of these people seem willing to understand why these people are angry at being treated like second-class citizens and shamed for trying to stick up for ourselves.
you willing to publicly acknowledge and admonish the massive amount of hatred, bullying, harassment, and intimidation that a lot of your fans infringe upon people? And I don't mean these tiny disclaimers that you put under the description fold or flash for 2 seconds at the beginning of the video that you know nobody reads. I mean a public and ongoing anti-bullying stance. Or do you kind of like watching your fans go around harassing people and calling them slurs and telling them to kill themselves? You kind of like it, don't you? I mean, if that's your thing, I guess that's just what you're into. Just makes you a dick.
Yeah, I've brought that up several times. I'll bring it up again now, just to make your stupid ass happy. I do not endorse, repeat, I do not endorse any of my subscribers harassing, attacking, even so much as going over to the original video and leaving a comment. Just don't do it. Just don't do it. Mainly because they don't deserve the views. No,
I hate you, Greg.
I'm serious. Don't do it. It's mean-spirited, and it solves nothing, it achieves nothing, it makes things worse. Don't do it.
Well done, Greg. That had all the genuineness of a philandering politician's public apology.
Why do you find it so hard to believe that feminists are being harassed online?
I don't, because fucking literally everybody gets harassed online. What I find hard to believe is that feminists getting harassed is in any way worse than anybody else getting harassed for any of their beliefs or any of their ideologies or any reason.
Do you want
Oh my god, are you really so invested in your supposed aversion to labels that you can't simply say harassment is bad without a buttload of qualifiers? You're not a skeptic. You're not a rationalist. You sure as hell aren't an egalitarian. You're a pathetic, fence-sitting coward. And people like you are a far worse hindrance to progress and a better world than the SJW boogeyman that only exists in your fevered imagination could ever be. You care more about avoiding drama and pretending to be smart and above it all than you do about actually having civil conversations.
Understand the key importance of reproducibility and repeatability in scientific research. That's simply going to Google Scholar, doing a 30-second search for keywords and pulling out the first paper you find that backs up your stance is not a particularly credible way to do research. That you have to have a much broader overview to read the material, to follow the citations through, to look at the broad brush approach to a particular problem.
I don't usually debunk a lot of videos that use papers as citations, so I don't tend to use papers to debunk those papers. Usually, if they do have a paper in their video, I'll use that same paper and manage to extrapolate completely different information from that paper than the original author of the video did. But if I do kind of just slap together a couple papers and just half-ass extrapolate a little bit of information for that, I see that as me fulfilling my role as a skeptic. I'm not trying to prove that my point of view is right. All I'm showing is that there's reasonable doubt to show that their point of view isn't necessarily fully accurate.
You do realize that you're as much of a social justice warrior as those you critique. It's just that you espouse a different form of social justice, a rather less considerate, rather less forgiving, rather less kind form of social justice.
That literally makes no sense. How is anybody in the anti-social justice community in any way espousing some new form of social justice? Unless what you're doing here is admitting that there is a problem within the social justice community that you also see in the anti-social justice community. Could you enlighten us on that?
If you identify as an egalitarian,
Espousing
then
is
I'm
also
interested
not a
in
word,
your
Greg.
take on the usefulness of the concept of the original position as laid out by John Rawls in his theory of justice.
I actually feel that that's one of the closest descriptions of my own personal take on what egalitarianism is. It still allows for meritocracy, it still allows for liberties and freedoms, it still allows people to achieve greatness and achieve social status, but the way that the government and society treats people has nothing to do with their social status, nor does their ability to achieve have anything to do with their social status. If every decision is made from behind the veil, if everybody
this
is
is not something he
treated as
provides
if
any
they are
evidence
fully
for.
equal and not given more opportunity or better treatment based on things like race and gender and ability, then everyone still gets treated equally within society, but it still allows for a meritocracy that allows people who are the most capable to achieve greatness, and in turn creates a stronger society society economically. And I have to say that it is in complete opposition to modern social justice, or to be more specific, the regressive left's take on how society should be run. Because they're building up people who don't deserve success to achieve success. So instead of a meritocracy, they have an equality of outcome, which gives social status and wealth to people who didn't earn it. Feminism and social justice and the regressive left, again to be more specific, has no veil. They see people for their color. They see people for their gender. They see people for whatever minority status they may have. They don't see people as equal.
Wake up, Greg. The world doesn't see people as equal. It doesn't. Being a basketball star didn't prevent LeBron James from having his home tagged with racist graffiti. A player for the Washington Redskins was recently profiled by a cop a few months ago. I've turned in applications with my, let's be honest, white-sounding name, and spoken with managers over the phone with my, let's be honest, white-sounding voice. He's heard that they're very impressed with my resume and want an interview, so I've dressed nicely, fixed my hair up, go in for the interview, they see me, talk with me, and I don't get a call back. We're trying to make a world where people are treated fairly, but as I said in another recent video, we don't get there by pretending we already are there.
As a supporter, as a proponent of freedom of speech, why do you want to quash academic freedom? If you're not familiar with the concept of academic freedom, it's worth, in the UK at least, looking up the 1988 Education Reform Act and seeing what that says about the rights of academics to put across unpopular opinions.
Dude, are you fucking serious? I think you're probably referring to Sargon's petition about halting or freezing social justice courses in universities. I didn't sign that petition. I believe in academic freedom as well, which is why I'm so pissed that the social justice community is trying to stop teachers from teaching things that are triggering, and stopping speakers from coming that may be triggering, and allowing their students to be challenged, allowing their students to be exposed to things that might change their worldview, allowing their students to feel uncomfortable and overcome that discomfort and become adults with character instead of fucking bubble wrapping them. That's where I'm seeing the injustice with academic freedom.
Look, I've heard enough of your bitching and moaning about how talking about race hurts you, and I don't really think you have a leg to stand on when it comes to people having their ideas challenged. Also, you are aware that trigger warnings exist to signal that something a person might be reading and watching might be triggering ahead of time. Again, it's nice that you've never experienced any kind of trauma in your life, but not everyone is so fortunate.
Right now.
Why are you so obsessed with Anita Sarkeesian?
You mean like the most famous feminist right now? The one that spoke to the UN and the one that's fucking with everybody's favorite hobby? Yeah, you're right. That's completely unfounded.
Do you really
I can name a list of feminists more famous than Anita Sarkeesian. I'll do that below because I'm tired.
Do you imagine that you will be able to perpetuate your adolescence for your entire existence? Wait, didn't somebody else ask this one? Wait, I gotta... Ah, fuck.
Oh my
Yeah, that's how he ends it. Man, this thing was painful to get through. But I think I owed it to my viewers to remake what could have been done better, to actually kind of delve into his arguments. So yeah. Like I said, I can't inoculate any of these people against their own bad habits, confirmation biases, and refusal to learn. But I can, like I always point out, I can educate the rest of you who are willing. So if you take anything away from this video, let it be that if you hear something that sounds weird or troubling to you, like talk of safe spaces, trigger warnings, or even like institutionalized oppression, please look it up and actually do research. Thank you very much. Once again, sources will be linked below, and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and as always, peace, love, and stay hydrated.